All right. Yeah, very close enough. All right. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 17 of The Followers. This week we have another guest for you. We have Billy Dennehy, soccer prodigy, turned S&C coach in his later years. So Billy, we're delighted to have you here with us to talk a bit about maybe your own career, your where you've come from, your learnings, where you're going, where you see the industry going, and yeah, so we'll take it from there.
No bother, boys. Thanks very much for having me.
No problem at all. Right, yes, I know you've had a fairly varied history in football, Bill. Just like to hear a bit about that, because I know you went over to Sunderland quite young, and then obviously coming back to League of Ireland, like it must have been, especially back, would have been what, kind of 10, 15 years ago when that was happening, so it must have been a huge gap, I suppose, even from academy football in Sunderland to back to League of Ireland. Who did you come back to Cork first, was it?
I did. I came back to Cork first, yeah. But even going back to the start there in relation to the training and I suppose the physical side of the aspect of all sports, before I actually went over to Sunderland, I was on the Kerry Minors as well in 2005. So, which being down here in Kerry, it's probably the number one sport, as in it gets the most recognition. So I was on the Kerry Minors and I was training with them 3-4 nights a week, along with still playing soccer or football or whatever you want to call it. So I was kind of over and back to England in between playing Munster semi-finals and finals and All Ireland semi-finals. So it was kind of a hectic time at a young age. But just touching on I suppose the training aspect of the whole side of things, I definitely feel like the training I'd been doing at the time in that sport definitely helped me when I did go on trials to other clubs and so on. So it was probably a benefit at the time, although nowadays you don't see it too often. But times were different back then. Young players would be playing 3 or 4 games over the weekend. So I think there's so much information and knowledge now. Kids don't seem to do that often, but I think it don't mean no harm anyway.
Do you mean in terms of like just playing other sports benefited you, or like some of the kind of physical training you were getting GA benefited you when you went to soccer?
Yeah, probably a bit of both. Probably a bit of both. I think like that when you're young anyway. Down here, I'd always encourage young players, especially when they're quite young, like, say from before you'd really go into League of Ireland under 17 or 19. I think it's good for young players to experience other sports, different environments, different probably training cultures, all that side of things. And as well, it's good to let young players find their own way. I think it's very important that you let young players make their own decisions, because I'm sure, it's probably a different topic now, but you see young players kind of maybe guided down a certain road that's not really their passion, and ultimately they'll end up falling away from it in later years. So I was very fortunate. I'd very encouraging parents who didn't matter to them if I was playing football, soccer or badminton. They would have been there supporting me anyway. So I was kind of able to play whatever I wanted until when I wanted. So again, the time kind of came then when I was 16, just going on 17, where you're going on trials to clubs in England, and then you've kind of a decision to make because contracts are on the table. And I actually ended up signing for Sunderland when we were in the All Ireland final with Kerry. So I went back to Sunderland and said, "Can I play in this All Ireland final before it's over?" And they're like, "No, not a chance. You're not getting injured playing in that game." So I missed out in the final, even though I played all the way up. But look, absolutely no regrets. I went over there, and as a kid to go over to England, it's a dream come true at the time. So it's definitely good memories, certainly.
Cool. And how long were you with Sunderland, Bill?
I was there probably maybe 4 years, 4 seasons, I would say. Yeah, it was just kind of after they got promoted to the Premiership under Keane. So Roy Keane was there, they got promoted, and there was just a massive influx of players and obviously budgets and money wise and all that. But to be over there at a time when there was such an Irish connection in the club, it was great, because like that, any young player, you're watching the senior international team, and you had Sunderland was littered with them. You had all the players, a lot of them who were playing for the Ireland senior team were at Sunderland at the time. So it was a great experience for a young player to be kind of looking at those lads and training with them as well. So definitely the fitness work that I'd done for the previous 2 years in other sports, I think it definitely helped me to be able to deal with the physical aspect of the game once I went over.
And then when you went over, was there kind of a big leap, I suppose, from the S&C point of view? Because I don't know, maybe in Kerry at that time it would have been pretty big, but like from a gym point of view, in the last kind of 5-10 years, it's really come big in Ireland. But like I have a feeling that it would have been, I suppose, it's not huge in football in general, But I'm still assuming that in Sunderland at that time, like it would have been kind of different gravy to maybe Ireland.
Yeah, it was all the clubs really. To be fair, they were all even going back then, they were all very forward thinking. Some of the clubs were, I suppose nowadays you see the last 2 or 3 years in particular, maybe League of Ireland clubs are putting a lot of emphasis on it. I think Dundalk did when they done really well for the last couple of years. The SNC was a main focus point in their work. But with going back then when I was going over, certainly when you went on trial, you had to be physically able first. So you would do the bleed tests, and you would do a lot of conditioning work and running sessions. I can remember Nottingham Forest, my very first day I was on trial. I was 17, and they put me into a hall with 2 other trialists, and we just done the bleed test, 3 of us, before we even kicked the ball. So and again, I scored off the charts in the thing because I'd been playing Gaelic football and all that, and soccer for a whole year or 2 before that. So it definitely was a big emphasis on it back then, and I'm sure it's even more so now. It's probably just more scientific now with numbers, and you're able to track distances a lot better now, and all that kind of thing. But it's a big part of the game. It's a big part of the game, and I think any player who doesn't really buy into it will be left behind.
It's big though, I suppose. I'm not sure how involved you still are at a League of Ireland level with any clubs, kind of maybe down around Munster, but it seems to me from an outside kind of point of view that, say, maybe yes, your Bows, your Rovers, your Dundalk have money or have full-time S&C coaches, but it seems like looking maybe First Division and even the bottom half of the Premier Division, it still seems very much it's either on a volunteer basis or still just kind of run the legs off them kind of approach.
Yeah, it is, and I think with the S&C and all that side of the game, I think a lot of it comes down to the manager. How much the manager wants to incorporate it into the work. You will have some managers who put a lot of emphasis on it, and the players have to be the same way, or else you have managers who maybe feel that they go down a more technical road with the players, and they feel like the S&C isn't as important. So I think all managers are different. I played for some managers who would be very, very S&C focused, and I played for other managers who aren't. I think it's down to the manager that way. But overall, I think the overall picture, when you break it down further, it's down to the player. It's down to the player. I think for me personally, I probably realised that if I wasn't one of the fittest, I probably wasn't going to play in a lot of teams I played in. So I had to make sure I worked hard at that. I had to make sure it was one of my strengths, because I probably wouldn't have been as technically good as a lot of the other players. So I had to make sure that physically that I was as good as I could be. So I could cover more ground. But it's a lot of it is down to the player, because you could be an S&C coach, you come in and do a session, but you don't have the control of, say, maybe being in England, where you can monitor the players 24/7 nearly. Here a lot of the emphasis down to the players themselves. How good they recover, how good their nutrition is, how good their hydration. Do they do all that themselves? So it's very, very difficult, I think, for any one manager to kind of incorporate it into the club. I think you have to bring in the right people and the right players to make sure that they're similar to your mind frame, whether that is going down the S&C road or it's not.
Fair enough. Now, speaking just of management there, you're after turning your hand to management. I suppose you've got such a savage history of really managers you've worked under. I know you've said briefly there you worked under Keane, Mick O'Neill, Stephen Kenny. Like, is there would you be able to pinpoint anyone you thought was kind of maybe not the best, but someone you've learned off most, or someone whose approach you'd kind of take into your role now with Kerry?
Yeah, again, I think with the whole coach and the manager of the game. When I was actually a player, I was saying, when I retire here, I'm going to take a couple of years away from the game, and I was even telling my wife that as well. But then when I retired, I started doing a bit of coaching, and within a few weeks there was bibs and jerseys all over the kitchen being washed, and there was footballs on, and she's like, "This is getting worse." And I think it's just in me. This game is in me. Like, what level, I don't know. But as I said, for now I'm involved with Kerry there, as you were saying. The underage structures have come on phenomenal since I was certainly playing here. We've got 4 teams playing in the underage League of Ireland now, at under 13s, 15s, 17s and 19s. And I'm probably just trying to give back everything that I have experienced to all the age groups. So I manage in the 19s, but I'd be involved with all the other age groups as well. But certainly, I suppose, like everybody, any experience you go through in life, you try and maybe take bits of positive things from it. And if you know somebody who's going through something similar, you try and pass it on. So that's what I've been trying to do down here. We've had young kids now going up with Ireland assessments and certain things like that. So it definitely helps them. I think that I can kind of give them a bit of a heads up as what to expect and kind of what way to prepare as well, most importantly. And again, when you break that down further, a lot of that does come down to the S&C side of the game, you know, even in relation to your nutrition and your preparation that way, and your diet and your sleep. So yeah, a lot of experience probably that I can give back, and I'm happy to do so.
And with that, so the Kerry 19s, you're working under the League of Ireland kind of framework. So the new, I suppose for those of you who don't know, they have like an elite program that's kind of under 13s, 15s, 17s and 19s as far as I know, to play in like an all of Ireland league. So that's, I think it's maybe 3 or 4 years old now, correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you think that's made an impact? Because that was a fairly big change from kind of maybe the province championships that were in place before.
Yeah, no, I personally, I think it's been unbelievable for the players. I think for the sport in the country, you know, if Ireland is going to be a country that's trying to compete around Europe, you know, at a high level, then, you know, I think this is a massive step forward, because I watch games, maybe 2 or 3 games every weekend before the lockdown, and you know, you have 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds playing high level competition every week. You know, historically, what you'd have is, you know, the Dublin teams, this big city teams would always be very strong, because the average of numbers, they've higher population, they've higher numbers playing the game. So the average of numbers, they'll be stronger, and then they're playing in a stronger league, which will develop their players more. Whereas if you're in somewhere like Kerry, you might have 1 or 2 good teams in a league, and the rest will be not as strong. So you might be going out winning 5 or 6-0, and that's not really benefiting the players on either side. But you know what I find with the League of Ireland underage, is that, you know, the players are getting competitive games every single week, and ultimately the training standards have to be higher as well. So like that, just to touch on Kerry, because I'm involved in it, you know, the under 13s coming now, we're starting to incorporate the TS&C in with them, you know, even small things like, you know, they take responsibility of foam rolling, their little things like that. So you're kind of getting a bit of a picture with the players younger now, which I think will help massively by the time they get to 17, 18. You know, it'll kind of be ingrained in them a little bit more. But you know what, if the more people you have, I think, aligned with the kind of physicality side of the game, the S&C, I think the better, because, you know, everybody's kind of, you know, incorporating it into their own individual sessions as well. And as I said, as the players get older, they're just adding on bits at a time, rather than trying to play catch up of maybe 4 or 5 years if they hadn't started it young.
Yeah, I think it's really, like when I was playing anyway, it was much more prominent in football than even maybe in Gaelic or rugby, where you'd have just really good teams playing against much inferior teams, just winning 6, 7, 8, 9-0, and really good players even just losing interest or going through the motions or coming off at half time just because, as like a mercy play to the other team, just so we're not winning like 25-0. I think just having an elite, like there's always been an elite, like there's always been an All-Ireland for Gaelic, there's always been AIL or kind of an All-Ireland league as well for rugby. It just seemed like a progression that shockingly wasn't in place already for football, but I think, yeah, it definitely has been really good. But I think from an S&C point of view, is there much S&C work you do with them? You said you started them off at 13s, but how far, or when does it kind of really engage them? Like when would you bring them into the gym, or how much kind of S&C work would they do?
Yeah, like ultimately there's a whole lot, but you know, when you kind of break it down further, then you go into, you know, budgets decide a lot of these things as well. So, you know, obviously, you know, we wouldn't have a facility where we'd have our own gym, so then you obviously have to look at hiring a gym, and you have to, you know, that side of things certainly comes into play as well. So, you know, if you're involved in a club that has its own facility, and it's, you know, it makes things a lot easier. But when you don't, and I'm sure it's similar around the country for a lot of clubs, you know, they wouldn't have their own gym. So the budget will definitely determine how much you can do that way. But with me, what I try to do is I try and give the players the responsibility themselves. So we'd give them their programs, and we'd give them their nutrition, and we'd give them everything. So what we try to do is we try and test them, and then they'd go away and to do their programs for a number of weeks, and then we try and reevaluate it then maybe every 6 weeks or so. So you're kind of getting an idea of who is really kind of doing their own work and who's not. But overall, you would like to be able to have more control of it in terms of having your own facility where you would have a certain age group in at least once, twice a week, you know, doing their work, and I suppose having little workshops where you'd kind of you'd probably be educating them on different sides of the thing. So I suppose technology nowadays does help as well. You know, you can kind of do a lot more through Zoom and you know, kind of emails and sending on programs to parents, all that kind of thing. So that certainly has helped. But overall, I think if you have your own facility with your own gym, then you're certainly a little step ahead than everybody else.
Do you have a kind of a pathway from, say, we would hope 13-year-olds would be able to do this much physically, not just soccer-wise, but physically at the end of the year, and then they're ready to go on to this at 15, then on to this at 17? Or are you still kind of in the stages of putting that together and planning out what's manageable and what's not?
Yeah, definitely. Kind of, it's a good question because I was always of the mind frame as a player that I don't think you can go into a group of 25, 30 players and give them all the same program. I think everybody has to be individualized. When you break that down further, I think everyone has to be individualized to their specific position. So you can't be given a centre half the same conditioning work as a left winger. I think it has to be incorporated into their position, in relation to the work that they do. So I suppose a lot of research, like myself personally, I've been curious about that anyway. You'd kind of be looking at, different countries and different academies and different places and in what way they go about it. If you see the resistance bands now and all that being used a whole lot more. Clubs even in their activation work, in their training. It's very, very interesting. But I think ultimately, you for me, a lot of it comes down to the resources again. It would be great to have, your own designated person who, and I'm sure clubs, once you get to senior level, first team level, you do have that. But the level we're at down here at the minute, you're definitely trying to maybe educate the coaches as well. Some of the coaches who'll be coming in doing these age groups that, this has to be done for maybe the first half an hour of the session or, the first 45 minutes of the session. So you're getting kind of the players young, getting their mind frame on it, because it's certainly definitely, like, the more you see, as the sport goes, it's a physical game. The speed of the games are getting higher and higher. So, if you're physically not able to compete, then, the technical side of the game can get away from you no matter how good you are.
Is there a way, sorry Bill, when you said you work with them from the under 13 level, is there, I suppose not benchmarks, but like there must be, say if you have a kid from when he's 13, there must be a period when he kind of like jumps a lot physically, like goes through that growth spurt. Is there any, not indications that you're looking for along the way, but is there any way you mentor people through if they're, I don't know, maybe if they're going through an awkward phase, when you're kind of 15, 16, you're growing kind of a bit fast, you're thrown off your game for maybe 6 months. Is there anything to kind of, not combat that, but kind of bring players through at that level? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is a good point, because even I'm just thinking of a player now off the top of my mind who I watched this year quite a bit, and the previous year he'd been very strong and he'd went through a growth spurt, and you could see his coordination and his agility was off. He was still trying to figure out, I suppose, the growth spurt and the bit of size that he put on, the height he'd grown and over a short period of time. In relation to the under 13s, it's their first year involved in the League of Ireland, so they're still quite young and getting to grips with training twice a week at a good level. Previously they might have been with their clubs, but they'd all be very good players for their clubs, so the demands mightn't have been on them as much in training. So with the training, again at 13, we broke it right down. It's just literally running mechanics, body weight stuff, running mechanics. That's all it is, because you'd be surprised even at that level, how, the running technique of a lot of players is a way off, and little small things like that. So that's the basic point really. It'd be, just body weight stuff and the running mechanics. But certainly once they get to 15, then you're probably looking to increase that a little bit more for the players who are able. But again, it definitely comes down to I suppose having the resources to go through each player individually and give them the program. But we're definitely doing a lot of work on that down here, and hopefully it'll keep progressing over the next couple of years.
No, I was gonna say, what's buy-in like from players? Like, if someone was coming from, say, a club that had never any interest in the physical side of things, or parents who wouldn't be particularly interested in it, is it hard to get them on board? Or once 2 or 3 or top players are into it, everyone else just kind of follows?
I think it'd probably come down to the age group that you're going into. So if you were going into a first team, say if you're going into a senior team, it probably might be a bit more difficult to get that buy-in, I'd imagine, if they hadn't been doing it previously. But certainly with the younger age groups, majority of them will do it whatever you tell them, which is, it's good in one way, but there's a big responsibility on the information you're given as well, because you have to make sure the information is correct for the individual and for their capabilities at the time. But I suppose the advantage I probably have down here is that whenever I kind of do suggest stuff to be done, is that I probably have the experience to show of why I would be recommending that, for their training schedules and for their pre-season programs or off-season programs. So definitely it's an advantage, I suppose, having played, that you can kind of relay the experience onto them. But yeah, to answer your question, I'd say a lot of it does come down to the age group that you go into in the first place.
And do you get much guidance from FAI, like headquarters, to filter down to that? Or are you kind of left to your own devices and you have to research it yourself a bit in terms of what information to give per age group, say?
Yeah, the FAI are very open that way. To be fair, they have lots of information, and they have the head S&C guy Horn there who does a lot of work, and I'm sure he'd be approachable. I haven't approached him myself personally about any of the stuff, because I feel like, with the bit of experience I have, and with the under-13s only starting off this year, you don't want to overload anybody, or you don't want to kind of take away from the game either, because yes, I suppose the S&C, to me, it would be a vital part of a player's development, but with a young age, when they're coming in, you want to make sure that it's all interactive as well, that you're making sure you're getting that enjoyment part of training, because that's very important, that the players coming in and they're enjoying themselves and they're not being overloaded with information and too much at a young age. So you're kind of trying to drip feed it, over a case of a number of weeks and months. So that's kind of the way I feel I've approached it, because like that, when you go in with an overload of, and the parents, and then there might be too much put onto the player in terms of their nutrition and everything. So I think kind of steady steps, that's the way I kind of learned it for myself. I was in England when I came back to Cork. I kind of started figuring stuff out myself, in relation to my own nutrition and my own training. And I can remember even when I was at Shamrock Rovers, when I first went to, when we were playing games on a match day, I felt like I wasn't getting enough into me on a match day. I felt like in physically. So I used to get up in the morning and I used to go for maybe a 5 or 6K run on the morning of a game. So I'd get up and I'd have my breakfast, I'd go for a run, I'd go back, I'd chill out, have my lunch, I'd get back up, I'd have my pre-match, and then I'd go and play a game. So I did that for 2 years at Shamrock Rovers, and I felt great. So all these kind of things are probably learning curve for yourself as a player, as an individual. So with the information you're given, I think it's very important not to say that this is the only way and this is the way you have to do it, because every player and every individual is different and they might find their own little way of doing things. So I think once you have an overall structure and a guideline, and I suppose standards as well, standards of where a player has to be physically. But overall, I think once you give them the information, certain players might figure out their own way of getting to the end point rather than exactly the way you've told them.
And do you give much of the information directly to players, or at some stages do you start off working with parents, or would you have a few parents' information nights or stuff like that at the start?
Sorry, you broke up there, John. It's just about information for the parents, is it?
Yeah. Do you structure it a bit to parents? Like, say, when you bring in 13s first, do you have an information night? Do you send them some information to filter it out to the young players themselves, or how do you manage stuff like that?
Yeah, we do. So we'd have as soon as the players come in from their clubs and sign League of Ireland level, we'd have a big night on the local hotels here at the Rose Hotel, and the parents would come in and the players come in and they'd sign up their registration forms for the League of Ireland, and it'd kind of be a bit of a big night for the players. So we kind of go through everything like that. Then we had a nutritionist come in and give a talk on the nutrition side of things, and give out meal plans and information on how to cook certain meals for the players. So definitely all that information is there and it's given to them. But again, and this is important, and I say this to the players too at a young age, and even for the 19s now, I'm saying, a lot of this stuff now, there's no excuses now, because back even when I was in England, like, there was no Wi-Fi in the houses. You had to go down to the phone box to make a phone call, phone home. You can pick up a phone now and Google, what do I eat to be a footballer? What gym program do I do to be a hurley player or a rugby player or a Gaelic footballer? So you have the absolute wealth of knowledge on your phone that you can read through for hours. So there's no excuse not to have any bit of information that you feel like you need for your position. But again, it all comes down to the player. You can have all the information you want in the world. You can give them everything. You can spoon feed them. But as soon as they go onto the pitch or their own mentality, I think that's the difference. I think the mentality of the player and how much they want to put into their on the pitch and off the pitch is the time where they'll go in their career.
Is there a bit, just wondering, with down as far as under 13 age there with the League of Ireland, and that you mentioned panels of around 30 players. I suppose when when we were at that age, it was the Kennedy Cup was the peak thing, the thing to be looking for, and trying to get onto that panel. But it was kind of, there would be trials throughout the year and stuff, and you kind of start building together as a team in the lead up to it. But if it's kind of a constant thing throughout the season, especially at that age where I suppose a young teenager there can take say admittance from a squad quite poorly, and that do you kind of keep is there a larger kind of look around for trialing out players in the League of Ireland at the younger age, to try and give people bits of experience to see if they can step up to the level? Or is it kind of limited squad numbers there like that? Say like if that was with your senior clubs, and you're pulling players from them, they're more in a position to adapt to that kind of, not making a panel or not making a squad. But at a younger age where I suppose you're trying to see how like some players will adapt to things, and, with growth spurts and stuff, and different growing rates. Do you kind of keep a larger squad in mind when with younger squads, or how does it kind of pan out?
Yeah, with all the age groups, what you'd have is you'd start off just with an open trial process. So the information will go out to all the clubs that say the League of Ireland. It'll be starting back in the season will start in March, but the preparations will probably start in December, January. So you'd have an open trial process of maybe 8 sessions. So whatever players want to come or whatever players want to put themselves forward, no matter where they're from or whatever club they're from, everybody's free to turn up. That's the way I like it, because yourself, when you're young, you might be playing with a team, but the manager might like Johnny and Mikey, but he might really like you, so he's not sending you for the trials. So I think it's good to keep it open. I think let everybody have a chance, let everybody put themselves forward if they want to. And then it's the case of going through the process, going through the assessments week after week, and breaking down your numbers and ultimately selecting your squad. In relation to the selection or not being selected, I suppose I've been, I don't know, is it fortunate or unfortunate enough, going back to your point there in the Kennedy Cup. I was the last player selected for the Kennedy Cup at that level. When in Kerry, I was only selected because somebody else got injured. And when we went for the week, I played the least minutes out of everybody on our squad. So I think I played 14 minutes or something or like that in the whole week. So, and in the next couple of years, I went away and whatever. But, I always say that to the younger players, that in this game and in a lot of sports, the higher up level you go, the higher level competition, the more ruthless it is. So you're not going to be picked all the time. That's a fact. There's managers who aren't going to pick you, and that will happen to everybody at some stage. It's how you deal with it and how you react to it. That's ultimately will determine where a player ends up. So I think it's important to make the parents aware of that as well. I'm always very open with that from the very first meeting when we have the information. So some people might think because their son now is playing League of Ireland that they're going to be at Real Madrid next. That's not the case. It's a very, very difficult road. It's a rootless road. But if you have enough fight inside you and you're willing to deal with setbacks and you have a bit of resilience, ultimately I think you can do okay. But that's down again. That all comes down to the individual player. You might have a very talented player at 12, 13, 14, and then 15, 16 might lose that bit of hunger, and another player who maybe wasn't so much in the picture has now passed them out, and he's the guy who's performed really well. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's a full roller coaster, and you see so many players coming in and out. But I suppose to answer your question, in keeping tracks of players, certainly they're monitored. You'd know them from coming into the trials, but how they progress is down to themselves. If they keep coming back week after week, year after year, and you see progression in them, then that's all down to themselves and the character that they have. So certainly they're the lads who I'd like in my team anyway.
And I did the other thing that I was just the other thing I was just wondering about, especially being in Kerry, where it isn't that far of a stone throw to kind of almost compare Gaelic football to religion. And I'm just wondering if, in your experience coaching, in comparison to say when you would have been in a position where you were playing both soccer and football, to to high levels, and seen to be an asset in both sports. Do you see any change in from a coaching perspective now to say the way there might have been a bit of friction in the past between GA and soccer for their top talents, and trying to get the most out of them, each side trying to get the most out of the player? Do you see much of a change in that these days, or is it still a little bit of a kind of a to and fro?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever kind of really looked out for it and kind of really took any notice of it, to be honest. I think the way I've gone about it is, what we do is, with all the players, like, we'd have an attendance sheet. We'd have their attendance from the very first assessment. So in January, whatever date we start, you'd have the attendance from day one. So for example, last year with 17s, like, we started off with over 67 players. So, like, you'd have the attendance of every player coming through. And we've started that now with younger age groups as well. So what I find is, when you go through weeks and months and years, if it's a year, 2 years, that you look back at their attendance, and I think that will ultimately tell you what the player wants to do. If you see a player has missed 30% of the sessions, 15% of them is on a match day or a day where another sport is on, that will tell you where the player ultimately wants to be. And I think it's the best way to do it, because then you're not asking a player or a parent what do they want to do. Are they picking this or are they picking that? I think their actions over the course of maybe 6 months, 12 months, 2 years will tell you that maybe they prefer another sport, which to me is perfectly fine. I think every young player should play whatever they feel happiest playing. Just because, say, if somebody like myself think a young player can be the next Ronaldo, that doesn't necessarily mean he wants to be the next Ronaldo. He might want to be something else. So you have to let the player make up their own mind and their own decisions. And I think, as I said, if you keep their attendance record from a young age, week after week, especially League of Ireland level, because you're training so consistently and the games are so consistent, there's probably more of a pattern if they were to be missing sessions that you'd see it. So I think that's the way we've gone about it, is we'd keep a record of their attendance. And then, as I said, as the years go by, you'll see maybe 15, 16, look, that player really probably is going to be playing another sport. So we'll pick a lad who is at 90% of the sessions. He mightn't be as good, but we'll put more development of time into him, because he more than likely will stay all the way up to under 19s and not leave at maybe 15, 16s when other sports come in.
What's the commitment like? Say at under 13, how many sessions a week are they putting together?
There'd be 2 sessions a week. So the 13s train twice a week, so they'd have 2 hours on both nights. So that'd be 4 hours coaching and a game. Is that enough for me? Probably not. You would like them in a bit more, just in terms of having a night dedicated to the strength conditioning and the nutrition side of things. We haven't got that facility yet, so a lot of that is done kind of sent to the parents by the coaches. But then you have to incorporate in that they're in school, they're playing for school teams, they're playing PE, they're playing other sports, which I feel they should. So you have to be careful that you don't take the enjoyment element out of it at a young age. I think that's very, very important. Yes, you want to set standards, and yes, you kind of want to develop them as much as possible. But I think, as I said, you kind of have to drip feed it a bit, because if you go in and overload players and parents with too much demands, ultimately, I think it will turn a lot of them away. So I think you just have to make everything as good as you can for the time that you have, and then slowly progress it as the years go on.
No, that makes perfect sense, because I was kind of wondering, is there an opportunity to still play? Because you said you found it so beneficial when you were younger to play Gaelic football and soccer. And then is it at a younger age now they kind of have to choose with just the amount of evens available? But 2 trains in a week certainly leaves an even available, or 2 even to go play Gaelic football or hurling or do polo cross or whatever it is else you want to do. Like, it's good to see that somebody still have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think in my case as well, it's probably not as it's probably not too similar to now, because there was no League of Ireland underage. We were just training with local club level. You might have a game this weekend, but there might be games called off for 3 weeks because of the weather. Yeah. Whereas now we are fortunate in terms of the facilities on the pitch. We've got 2 full-size 4G all-weather pitches side by side, so training is never cancelled or games are never cancelled. So you are kind of conscious of the demands are more now, I think, on young players in terms of the level of competition they're playing at, and as I said, school and everything so on. So I think definitely at a young age, for me anyway, it's my opinion that the players should be free to explore whatever sports they feel, and certainly as the year goes by, as soon as you're coming to maybe 16, 17, then you'll probably will see the lads who want to pick whatever sports they want to choose.
Do you think that League of Ireland, the new system, kind of hopefully will help more players, say kind of potentially good soccer players from Kerry, kind of stick it out? Because I suppose with the League of Ireland system, there's much more of a pathway to becoming a professional football at like League of Ireland level and then making that step across the water. Whereas before it was very much, right, you're a good player for your club. The next step is you somehow have to be scouted by Manchester United and play for this. Whereas at least if you go, okay, well I've been League of Ireland under 13s, 15s, 17s, 19s, hopefully League of Ireland team will pick me up, and then like most of the current international setup would have been in the League of Ireland at some stage and then gone across the water. So do you think, especially compared to maybe like if you're playing county, there's obviously, if you're playing county underage, you have the potential to go play for county senior. Whereas I feel before this League of Ireland play, there wasn't that pathway at football.
Yeah, no, geez, you're dead on. Like me and my brother speak about locks. My brother went to Everton at 16. My brother Dan signed for Everton, and we often talk now. And he's managing Cove's under 17s at the minute because he's living in Cove with his missus and his kid. So we often speak now, like how do we even get over there? How do we even train with these boys over there? Like where we come from, like where the preparation we had. Yes, I say the sports benefited me physically, but technically and tactically side of the game, miles away, miles off, because you didn't have it. You weren't in the environment at home, not even close, to go from. It's like going from 0 to 100, literally. So now with the underage structures in the League of Ireland, there's so much help for the players, and the information is so much better, and the standard of coaching is so much better, standard of matches is so much better. So overall, I think football in Ireland is in a very, very good place. The underage structures, I think, the underage international managers, I think there's so much being put into the underage teams that the underage international teams are doing really well. And I think a lot of that is stemming from the League of Ireland underage as well, because you see a lot more home-based players picked in the squads now because they're playing in regular competition every week. So I definitely think, to go back to your point, for a young player now to maybe go over to England at 17, 18, if they had come through the League of Ireland setup for 3 or 4 years before that, it definitely will help them when they get over there, no doubt.
You said there the standard of coaching has improved a lot. What do you think has driven that?
I think a lot of players who have probably played are getting back involved. I look at even Rovers there now, Shamrock Rovers, a lot of the lads, Brad's obviously the manager, but Robinson's involved, Aidan Price is involved, Pat Flynn was involved, Rice was involved when he was there. There's certainly a lot more players now who'd maybe played that are looking, going back into coaching. That maybe wasn't as common going back maybe 10 years ago, and bring it down to even Kerry's level. You can't, the people who were coaching back then, I'm very grateful for them. Everybody's a volunteer. They're all giving up their time, coming in from work, going out to line pitches with, I can remember my coaches and my dad helping out to line pitches on the morning of the game. They're putting down 2 Coke bottles and a piece of string, and they're pushing a thing down to line the pitch, and they're putting up the nets and the goals. And they're what people did just to give young fellas a game. But if you're expecting to go from that level up to the top level, that's very, very difficult then. But I think definitely probably the information as well, as I said, going back to technology, you can watch YouTube now, and you can watch Liverpool train, you can watch Barcelona train, you can watch Bayern Munich, AC Milan, all these teams in whatever country you're in. Like I sit down and often watch training sessions and matches in all different kinds of countries, to watch different environments and training schedules and different qualities of games. So there's definitely a lot more help nowadays than there was back then, and I think that's probably contributed to the standard of coaching as well.
And do you think maybe the underage league as well, it gives more people an opportunity to practice being a coach? Like if someone has given up playing soccer at age 32 and they go back and start training 15s and they're with them for 2 years, like they get a chance to make, not on purpose obviously, but they get a chance to make some of their mistakes then when it may not be as high stakes, and then they slowly move up to 17 and then maybe assistant coach with an adult team. And just the fact that there is more opportunities now to serve your apprenticeship as such as a coach before you do get to that top level with Rovers, Bows, whoever it may be.
Yeah, it is. I think definitely one of the strengths of the underage League of Ireland setup as well is the coaches as well. I think it's not just for the players. I think the coaches can benefit from it massively as well, because as I said last year with Kerry, it was my first year managing, and it was a massive experience for me. We were fortunate we got to the All Ireland final against Bows. We had some very good nights down here. We played Cork City. We played, a lot of big teams. But like that, it's a kind of a case of, learning on the job, learning on the go. It's one thing being a player, and it's one thing having experienced being in dressing rooms or playing under other managers. But now it's how do you implement that to these group of players, these group of kids? How do you kind of take from what's in your mind and give it to them in a way that they understand it simply, that they can kind of understand you where you're coming from. So that's the learning of it all for me, is making sure that the information you're giving to the players is clear and making sure you're giving to them in a way that they understand. Because as I said, you can have all this information in your head and you can read all these books as you want, but if you can't relate to it to a player of a certain age group, then it's going to be difficult for them to understand what you mean. So it's definitely a plus having the underage League of Ireland set up for the coaches as well, definitely.
There seems to have been a big influx in kind of younger players from, say, your playing days coming back into coaching. Like before that, I think a lot to do with, as you were saying, there's a big change in coaching, but before, say, kind of your generation, it was kind of Pat Devlin, Pat Fennon, and they'd been almost rotating through clubs for so long that it was the same managers doing the same thing and nobody really wanted to come in. But now this generation really seems to have, they're taking it to the next level with Bradley, and then even like world-class players like Stephen McPhail, Duffer have come back to, I suppose, get a start on management in this league, which is great to see.
It is, and I think that probably when you see the likes of Duff and these boys who have been at the very, very top level, and them coming back and starting where they're starting at, it kind of, I suppose, it gives everybody else kind of to say, geez, well, those boys are back here doing it. This mustn't be as bad as people think. You see them down on the 15 games and young teams games. So for me, it was my intention always when I did come into this that I really wanted to start at the bottom. When I first started doing it, I was involved with under 11s, 12s, ETP sessions on Sunday mornings. So if it gets to the stage where my career progresses and I go into management, I want to know exactly what's involved in every single age group of the club. I want to know exactly what's involved as soon as a player comes in at 11 or 12, what's required at each age group as soon as they're getting near the first team. So that's probably where I'm at the minute. Is it's definitely learning. It's learning every week, but it's very, very enjoyable. As I said, some players retire. I know lads that have retired, they hang up their boots and they don't want to see a ball again. So, but I think definitely for me, and I'm a bit, the game is inside me. What level I don't know, but I'll definitely be coaching and managing at some level anyway for the rest of my career, no problem.
With the underage setups, obviously it seems quite strong. I know you've got to a few finals even with the Kerry underage setup at the moment. It's back in the day now since they had a League of Ireland senior side. Do you think there's the potential there? Obviously early days, but to have a League of Ireland side out of Kerry again? Because obviously the population's there, the athletes are there. It's just getting the buy-in, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I've probably been asked a lot now. I suppose since last season when 17s kind of were a bit competitive, you're asking, okay, what's the next step going to be for these players? The next step for that group was 19s this year, which is I went up to 19s this year. We had a lot of those boys up, but the squad we picked last season, myself and James Shukru, who's a good friend of mine, he's in it with me. We picked that squad for this season, so we picked half and half. So last year's squad for us were all underage again this year. So all those boys are still with the 17s. So we went up to the 19s with the boys who are coming up to the 19s level. But I suppose what I wanted to see was, can those players now be competitive at 19 level? Because there is a big jump. There's the 19 level in Ireland is very, very high.
Even physically, it's a big jump.
Yeah, it really is. Like, you're looking at some boys coming in now and they're taller than myself. Thinking, physically it's a big, big jump. So I suppose down here in Kerry, is there potential? Yes, but I feel that the players have to be ready. I think if you are going to go about it, you have to do it in a structure that's self-sustainable. So I don't think you can ever rely on a big budget to be going out and signing players from all over the country and give them accommodation and give them big contracts. Because if you look around the league, to me, that way has never worked, bar one or two. If you look at all the clubs that have had financial difficulty, it's just not, the industry isn't big enough in Ireland, I think, to accommodate that. But if you go and you're self-sufficient and you're producing your own players and you add in one or two from outside, then all the better. But you have to make sure that your own core group of players is strong and they're the ones that are going to be coming through year after year. And if you play them in your first team, brilliant. Or if not, maybe you can sell them on to England or to other clubs and make yourself self-sufficient that way. So I think if we are going to go about it, that's the model we have to do, and that's going to take time.
That's, I suppose, along the lines of what Cabinteely have done in the first division. They very much built off their youth setup. Again, they've had investment, but it's not astronomical. Like, it's not something like, say, Sporting Fingal had huge investment and couldn't sustain it at all. These Cabinteely seem to be taking along and just trying to slowly build up a fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a very good point. And they've been going well for the last couple of years now. They're thereabouts all the time, and they're slowly building and producing their own players as well. Yeah, I definitely think in Ireland anyway, especially unless you're Shamrock Rovers or Dundalk, who have big financial backing, it's going to be difficult for everybody else to match that. So you have to make sure that you're doing it in a way that the club can survive first and foremost.
Did Wexford kind of go about something like that? Like, I remember when I go to school in Wexford and I played in the Wexford Soccer League, Division 4. That was useless. But like, they had that the Wexford Youths was such a big thing for so long, and they used to go on the trips to Italy. It probably took them like 10 years before they eventually got an adult team together, and that was even like years of underage, moderate success, and a decent bit of money from a rather colourful businessman and politician, like, before they finally got there. So it just shows, like, it does actually take a lot of, like, you're not going to build a successful adult team in the League of Ireland from one good underage team. It does take like an influx of those over time even.
Yeah, no, you're dead right, and that's kind of what I was saying. When people were saying with the 17s last year, they did really well. These boys we seen as well, like, what's coming for 2 or 3 or 4 years behind them. You're dead right. You can't just hang your hat on one age group or one group of players. You have to make sure that you're prepared for at least 3 years anyway behind that. That you have got a core group of players who will be coming through, who can be a bit competitive, because the last thing you'd want to do is to go and step into a level where you're way out of your depth. You have to make sure that once you do go, that you're ready and that you're competitive. So for me, like, down here in Kerry, that's a lot of work that's being done at the minute. And will it happen? Who knows? It might not. But I want to make sure that if it does, that the players are more than ready.
You mentioned there just around coaching and kind of upskilling and coach development, that, like, you can find books and read books and all like that. Would you have any recommendations for anyone listening in, that either S&C wise or soccer wise, what they could maybe go and look up, have a read of, any good presentations online they can have a look at?
Yeah, again, there's quite a lot. There's lots of different, I suppose, people who in other sports who you might take a bit from. There's actually a book I'm reading at the minute is John Calipari. Success is the Only Option is called. It's a phenomenal book. He's a high school basketball coach in America. He's had the most players that have come through him that have played in the NBA than any other coach in the history of high school basketball. And it's very, very interesting. And when you're reading it, it's not just you nearly forget about the sport. You nearly forget about the sport that it is. The dynamics of the way the sessions go and the relationship building with the players, and I suppose the challenging the elite performing players, should we say, and incorporating the other players into the group. It's all very interesting. I think you can take something from everybody if you're open-minded. Some people, might think that they don't need any help or they know it all themselves, and other people might try and take little bits from everybody else and different sports and different cultures and coaches. And certainly I think it's fascinating for me, when you look around different sports and organizations, what makes certain managers successful. And I think even if you go back to the Dubs over the last couple of years, winning 5 in a row, that's not an accident. The way that manager has incorporated that into the group of players and to develop it year after year. And when you look at some of the selection decisions that he made over the years as well, leaving players out in All Ireland final days with maybe 2 or 3 All Irelands in their pocket, all these things are fascinating to me. They're very, very interesting. So it's good to have the time to be able to read up on them and watch them and see what you can use. And obviously a lot of it you won't be able to use. It's a different sport, but you will be able to certainly use bits and pieces, and that's very fascinating to me.
That's all fantastic. I suppose my only kind of question is more kind of personal to you, Billy. Then just is there, like, I suppose who would have really kind of I don't know, kind of inspired you really to kind of to build your kind of your own belief in yourself there, as you mentioned early on in our chat today. Was there anyone that actually kind of inspired you? The way you're reading that book now and you're taking bits from it and looking around to other coaches and getting inspiration from them. But is there anyone that stands out for you in particular, like local or international, whoever it might be, that kind of really helped solidify your kind of own like self-belief in yourself and when you were growing up and pushing on there?
Yeah, again, I suppose all these people that I'd be, watching from afar, I suppose, in different sports and organisations, and trying to bring it relevant to myself and my own coaching career now. I'd probably just be more of a curious mind looking at them, but in terms of inspiration and in terms of, I suppose, people I'd look up to, I don't think you ever have to look too far from home. For me, when I look around and I see, say, my mother and father get up every morning, they go to work, they work hard, they come home, they make a dinner, they call up to see me, my wife, and my son, and my brother, my sister. And when I see people who get up and go to work every single day, try and do the best for their family, that inspires me. That's what makes me want to get up and work hard and train or educate myself in coaching and try and progress me for my family. So certainly, when I hear people say, "Oh, this manager I look up to Klopp or Guardiola," that doesn't really resonate with me. Yeah, I might look at them and be curious about what they're doing and what I might use, but in terms of inspiration and I suppose what motivates me, it's more close to home. It's looking at the people close to you and seeing the daily work that they put in to progress themselves and their families and help people around them out. So that's certainly the way I see things, and that's what I try to incorporate into my own life as well.
I was really worried there that Damien was going to ask, have I ever punched you on the Gaelic football field?
That's exactly what came into my head. I was like, Damien's going to say something stupid about his checkered past.
Yeah, brilliant.
No, I avoided that. I left that off.
But anyway, I have two questions just about the Rovers' glory days, Billy, if you don't mind.
No problem.
First off, I think Mick O'Neill just seems to be one of the most underrated managers around. Like outside of Ireland, he doesn't seem to get enough credit. When he brought the first Irish team ever to Europe, he brought Northern Ireland to Europe. How good was he actually to work with? Like, was he just a very good man of management, or just kind of what made him very good? And also, like that Rovers team at the time looked like they were just going to dominate for the next 10 years. Was there anything specifically that went wrong, or was it just, I don't know, kind of everything was hyped up too much and it just...
Yeah, to go back to Michael, I'm not too sure. I think he's in good esteem all over the place now. He's managing Stoke, which is a massive club. He's going okay. I definitely could see Stoke, him getting Stoke promoted over the next couple of years. But
I think they're closing in on promotion now already. Where they're doing well, obviously early days, but he's hit the ground running with them anyway.
Yeah, no, he's very, very good. I mean, Michael, funny story actually. Michael, I was playing for Cork. We were coming to the end of the season, and the season had gone all right for me. So I had a few offers from different clubs. I suppose two biggest at the time were Rovers and Bows. Bows were looking to sign me, and Rovers were looking to sign me. So I came up with my dad, and me and my dad, we came to meet the clubs and whatever. So as it transpired all along, Michael had been phoning my dad for maybe a few weeks before that, trying to get me up and trying to sign me. And all along, he thought he was talking to me, but he was actually talking to my dad. When we came up, he was like, Jesus, I thought you were very mature the way you were going on about it. I didn't know it was your own man I was talking to all along. But yeah, he was very, very approachable, like, and a manager you kind of always, I suppose you always felt you wanted to do well for. I think he kind of had that influence over a group that no matter what team went out onto the pitch, you always wanted to make sure that you kind of didn't leave them down. That you kind of you gave everything, and I think it was just a special group as well at that time. Going back to those years, I think without a doubt we could have went down and dominated over the next couple of years. So something similar to what Dundalk did over the last few years. But Michael left, and certain players then were starting to leave as well. Big Al left, Twiggy left, Civi left. Like everyone kind of started to leave. And that obviously made things difficult, because those players, are probably were the best players in the country at the time. You can see the difference Big Al has made coming back to Rovers last 2 years. So you can imagine, that group of players being together and staying together. It would have been very, very exciting. But for the club, they went through the tough couple of years trying to figure it all out, and I think they're in a good place now. I think they've probably learned a lot as well from that period. Also, so it's good to see them back where they are now. Definitely.
That Rovers or Bows choice is a real sliding doors moment.
I know that. I tell you, because Bows had won I think they'd won the league the year before. If my memory isn't great now, but I think they did. So Rovers had come second in their first year back in Tala. So it was a big call at the time. It was a big call. But once I went to the club and to Rovers and met Michael and the lads that are there, Jonathan and Noel and all the lads in the background, they're great people, they're great lads, and it's a real family club. And you get that feel once you're in there, that the club can't do enough for you, and the people in the club can't do enough for you. And once you're out on the pitch and you're giving your best, the supporters are great as well. And it's certainly a time in my career that was probably the best time in my career. I'll never forget. It was, a special time, and I'm fortunate enough to have it, really.
Super. Have we anything else, Les, you want to chat about? I'd be wary that I'd imagine, Billy, you've some bit of a life to get back to.
You're all right, boys. No problem. I've the son to feed downstairs, but about it at the minute with this COVID. There's not much else going on.
That's true.
Have you stopped training with Kerry now? Has that stalled all the underage leagues and everything as well? Yeah.
Yeah, it has. Like that, there is guidelines in place where you can continue to train in groups of 15 and all. But with us, a lot of players have to travel quite a bit, to come to train, and so you have to kind of be mindful of that. And then we don't know if the games are definitely going to come back on the dates that they're saying. So, again, look, with all this kind of thing, certainly everybody loves sports, and we miss going to the gym, and we miss training, and we miss being out. But there's certain things that are more important. So you might have family members that need to be kept safe. So you have to kind of, make the sacrifices, I think, over the next couple of months. But hopefully going into next year, if they're talking about this vaccine, hopefully it'll be here and we can all get back to normal, and the gyms can open and we can train as normal, and we can get into the stadiums to watch the games, because they don't look right being empty at the minute.
Are you doing any stuff online or kind of virtually with players, or send them on stuff to do? Are you kind of leaving them relax a bit, or how are you managing that?
Yeah, with the 19s, we had the Under Armour At My Run app, so we'd have them at My Run, and we're all linked up to that, and we'd give them schedules to be doing themselves. But with the last lockdown now leading into this one, I think it's very difficult to keep the player not so much motivated, but you're nearly kind of saying to yourself, are you giving them this just for the sake of it? Do we have, you can't say, look, this is definitely, we're back on this date, now we start to prepare. Until that happens, I think it's difficult to kind of keep the players engaged, because it's not really fair on them to be overworking them now, and possibly they're not even being, something for them to come back to. So we've given them a bit of time off the minute, we've given them having a bit of a break, and once we find out an exact return date, an exact fixture list that we can come back to, then we'll definitely kind of have them more accountable in for their training and get back into together training. So I'm definitely looking forward to myself. I'm sure the players are as well. So there's nothing like it getting out on the training pitch, especially now in these evenings when you come home. It's dark straight away, so it's nice getting out under the lights and having a session on for the players. So we're definitely looking forward to going back, and some bit of normality would be nice for Christmas as well, without a doubt.
That should just be great. It'd be great to see Kerry involved in a sport that involves kicking around the ball a bit later in the year.
Is that a Carlo, man? Have you
I was waiting for that one. I know. I tell you one thing, a lot of people down here thought they were looking forward to, having it to watch. So I keep saying it. We need to get the soccer boys out in the League of Ireland, and we'll keep the flag flying for a while.
No, that's been ideal, Billy. Thanks very much for coming on and giving us your time there. We'll
no, not a bother, boys. No problem. Thanks for having me.